What's something you've seen with your own eyes that nobody believes when you tell them? In elementary school, while I was on the playground, I picked up a small stone from the ground. About 20 meters away, there was an old concrete wall with a tiny hole in it. I told myself that if I threw the stone, I would definitely hit that hole. I threw the stone as hard as I could, and it flew the whole distance and landed directly in the hole. I called my friends who were standing nearby to come and see it. None of them believed me. I still think about it to this day. Answer: I worked as a hostess at a lunch place. During a slow time, the cook was dropping 7 pennies on the counter to see how many would be heads or tails. I said, let me try. Dropped all of them at once, and all of them came up heads. He never looked at me the same way again. I tell people I don't gamble because my good luck shows up when there isn't money riding on it. Another example, father-in-law was teaching me how to play poker. He dealt me a hand, and it was a royal flush. He screamed. Told me to never bother gambling because I just blew all my life's card playing luck before I even learned the game. Next story. I once went to an eye and ear hospital to get my ears cleaned. It was really early, maybe 8 a.m. Anyway, I'm waiting in the emergency room, and POW, the door flies open, and a guy dressed in like a long religious frock, Greek or Russian Orthodox perhaps, comes charging through the door, bleeding from the eye sockets, then disappears into the next room. I was shaken as it was surreal AF. Maybe 20 seconds later, POW, the same door opens, and a second priest in the same garb runs through, also bleeding from the eye sockets. What in the name of exorcisms gone wrong did I witness? I swear that this is true and not exaggerated. Next story. I found and lost a gold nugget on the American River when I was a courier. I had dropped off a package in the area and stopped by the American River to soak my feet before heading back to San Francisco. I went poking around the base of a boulder, and in the lee side of it, I found a gold nugget about the size of a mechanical pencil eraser. In terms of dollar amount, it was probably worth about 50 max. It wasn't a rich find, but it was pretty neat. I put it in a tape cassette box for safekeeping and never saw it again. That was over 30 years ago. I've told people about this at least a dozen times, and no one, not even my wife, has ever really believed me. On the one hand, I understand why. It's a the fish that got away type story, but damn it, it happened. Oh well. I have the memory of finding it to put a smile on my face, and the memory of losing it to wipe the smile off. ETA. I didn't expect this to blow up like it did. Thanks. And Reddit is weird. Answer. Went out with my brother to a fancy restaurant. Some miscommunication occurred, and we ended up with 3 dozens of oysters. Not a big deal. We enjoyed them. One of the oysters I picked had a pearl in it, not a nice spherical, glossy, smooth pearl, but a ridged, tear-shaped one. It made me happy anyway. I gave the pearl to my brother as a payment for the dinner. Next story. At 3 a.m. on a foggy HWE in country Australia at 100 kph, the bumps in the road forced the bike to hit my butt. It sent me vertical. My helmet face touched the front wheel mudguard, and my feet were over the handlebars. Luckily, I could slightly throttle, so the bike pushed forward and dumped me back onto the seat. I had a miracle save, but my nervous system wouldn't let me hold still or get back onto the bike after it pulled over on this foggy jerk road. At which point a gorgeous ringtail possum, normally pretty shy, walked past me and climbed a farm fence post instead of the tree next to it. The night was incredibly still and quiet, so I whispered hi to her. She seemed curious, so I approached her. She let me pat her. A completely wild possum. Some in suburbs can be friendly with humans, and she seemed like she was sent right there and then, just to calm me down. I patted and chatted quietly in the middle of the morning, long enough to be distracted and fully calmed down. At which point she wandered off into the fog. I managed to get back onto the bike and ride home unscathed, thanks to my guardian lil possum. I told my mates the next day and got told to have another pipe, mate. It was pretty incredible. Answer. Guardian possums are a thing. My wife and I had one the night before our wedding. There was some family drama that really upset my wife, so we went for a walk. We ended up at this old cemetery with a small church in it and sat on the front steps to talk. We agreed that the wedding was for nobody but us, so we decided to read our vows to each other right there. As we started reading, a possum walked out of the bushes and sat on the walkway about 20 feet in front of us. He just sat there watching while we read the vows, cried a little bit, and hugged. Then waddled off. We always joked that the possum officiated our real wedding, and the ceremony the next day was just for show. Next story. In broad daylight, I, my workmate, once saw an electrical line spark, short circuit, and fall to the ground as we were approaching the person's house. There was no storm or weather, so this in itself is quite odd, but it was our job to fix these sorts of problems. We were driving our line worker truck back to the depot. We saw this line flash and drop, and we just pulled up and started replacing the line. The lady of the house was home hanging out washing. By the time we had set up to work, she had not even noticed her power was off. To this day, the probabilities of this event blows my mind. Answer: speaking of power lines, one day I was going to work and noticed a lot of activity by the exit onto the main road. What I saw still confuses me to this day. One of the poles was broken and mostly down, but being held up by the tension of the wires. There was a pickup truck on top of the wires, like 5 to 10 feet off the ground. Obviously, they hit the pole, but I have no idea how it got up in the air on the wires completely off the ground. Next story. I was hiking in western North Carolina on a rainy afternoon. I'd been hiking for a few hours and had not seen a soul. In the distance, standing on the trail, was the biggest buck I have ever seen. It was something out of Disney. He stood regally in the path ahead. I slowly approached him, knowing he would bound away as soon as I got too close. But to my surprise, he didn't. He just stood there watching me. He had these giant antlers, and I am 5'6", and he towered over me. I talked gently to him as I approached and wished I had an apple or something to give him. I have no clue if he would eat it or not, Lowell. I reached my hand up to his nose to let him sniff me, and he lowered his head and did. We just stood there looking at each other in the stillness. He then quietly walked into the woods. I felt such awe and wonder at being trusted and being given this special moment with a wild animal. Next story. I hardly ever tell people this because it sounds like such a load of bollocks that a 10-year-old would make up. But one day I was looking around a castle in Germany, Spandau Citadel, and there was a guy teaching archery classes with a bunch of young fellas. On my final pass by, he was packing up on his own, and I asked if I could have a go. He said yes, and I hit the bullseye first and only try. I was delighted with myself, but I also thought about how if I tell people it sounds so made up and a particularly pathetic lie to make up about yourself as well. Answer: I was working as a counselor for a Mormon pioneer camp, showing the kids how to load and shoot a black powder rifle. We had a hat on a stick way off in the distance. After loading the rifle, I said, "Then you just aim and shoot." I hit the stick, holding the hat, and it exploded. I calmly acted like this was normal. The other girls on staff were laughing because this never happens. I did not get lucky again. Next story. That I remember the day my brother was born in vivid detail, even though I was only 2, and that an opossum jumped out of my grandma's lawnmower bag after mowing the lawn. Also that I'm allergic to bananas for some reason. My cousin doesn't believe someone's lips swelling up and chest getting itchy. Itchy is the only things that happen, and water fixes it. Next story. When I was a teenager, my older sister and I were watching a lightning storm out the window from our shared bedroom. I started to walk away from the window, and suddenly lightning struck outside, and both of my hands were outlined in green. All I can describe it as is a green energy that outlined just my hands and each one of my fingers for like 5-10 seconds and then disappeared. It was not glare or reflection from the window. It was like a live and vibrating outline of electricity. My sister remembers it this clearly as well. Answer: I was sitting on the ground outside my apartment one summer afternoon watching a thunderstorm roll in. Lightning struck the tree across the street from me. About 1 second before the lightning hit, everything around me turned bright green. I could see every object, tree, our street sign, etc., but they were all various shades of really bright green. When the lightning hit, everything flashed white and I was blinded for a split second. Then everything went back to normal. I know the lightning hit the tree, but I've researched lightning for years. I'm a bit of a weather geek. Right before a lightning strike, there are feelers that get sent up towards the clouds. The feelers that descend from the clouds connect with the ground feelers. The point of greatest connection with the best static discharge is where the bolt forms. I'm wondering if you and myself were observing one of those feelers extending from ourselves and surrounding us. Perhaps the buildup of electrical charge around us versus the buildup above us caused the temporary color change. Next story. A fox once gave me a wallet. I was walking home after the pub one night, and I realized that on the other side of the street, there was a fox keeping pace with me and shadowing me as I walked. When I spotted him, he stopped and sat down on the edge of the curb. It was about this time of year, so quiet and cold, and not much traffic in residential side streets. Then he looked at me, scrambled up over a wall, scrabbled at the base of a tree, and came back with something in his mouth, put it down on his side of the street, backed off a few steps, looked at me, looked back at the thing on the ground, looked back at me, sat down again, waited. I crossed the street and collected the wallet. Not much in it, but an old expired library card and a couple of other cards. Nothing I could really use to return it. The wallet wasn't in great shape. So I took it home with me, and the fox followed me almost to my door, looking at me from time to time. Never did figure out if there was something else I was supposed to do for the little guy. Next story. I was cycling over an overpass on my way to work, and in the grass below stood a man wearing very old-fashioned clothing. I'm talking pea coat, hat, old-style leather shoes. I'm guessing 1930s style or something. Guy was looking around very confused at his surroundings, like he didn't understand what he was looking at. Weird thing was, this was purely a bicycle infrastructure part. No way of getting there by car or any business being there being dropped off or picked up by a motorized vehicle. I looked forward, stopped the bicycle so I could get a better look, and looked down to where he was. Guy was nowhere to be seen. He couldn't have walked that far in those few seconds that he would be out of sight, and he couldn't have been picked up by a car there at all. Best I can guess, I either was hallucinating, never happened before or since, or he was a guy somehow in the wrong time for a short period. Answer: a friend of mine was house sitting for a prof circa 2018. She did this a few times, and we would always get together with our crew to play DD in their fancy houses. It was cool because we had access to fancy coffee machines. Two of our crew were baristas and could respectfully snoop a little bit and see how the other half lives. So I drove over and parked my car in front of the house. I got out and started walking to the front door. And as I walked by the living room window, I saw a very large man, probably 275, 6'3" foot tall, with a long ponytail and glasses, wearing a red t-shirt and blue jeans, who was just milling around the living room, clear as day. He never looked at me, but he was moving, looked like he was talking to someone, and turned away toward the hallway as I got closer. He definitely wasn't one of our DD crew and didn't look like anyone I knew. So I thought it was pretty weird. Went inside, chatted, and settled at the kitchen table after a few minutes. I fully expected someone to introduce this guest, but after about 10 minutes of sitting at the kitchen table, I spoke up and said, "So, we're the only people here, right?" My friend got a little angry and said, "Yes, why?" "Don't joke about that, shoot. Everyone was just teasing me that this house is haunted. I have to stay here alone." I described to everyone the person I literally just saw standing in the living room. The crew made some ohs and started joking about it, but I wasn't joking. I then chalked it up to being exhausted from exams and assignments and that I hadn't slept well the night before. I told the DM I genuinely wasn't trying to creep her out. I think I'm just tired and hallucinating. Sometimes I wonder what the owners of the house would have said if I had described that person to them. I don't believe in the supernatural, but it's a fun story I share with uni students sometimes. Next story. Full-on clown with makeup in an abandoned building. It was the middle of nowhere. Me and my cousin both pissed ourselves and ran like hell to get to a river where we both would have rather died of hypothermia. Let the current take us way out of there and finally got back to civilization. Noon believed us. Answer: I work unusual hours. One night I was driving home around 3 a.m. and saw a clown on the side of the road just waving at me, just standing on the footpath outside a school in a sleepy suburb that backs onto forest, alone, bright, colorful clothes and full makeup, smiley face, wig. One hand raised, waving. At 3 fudge a.m. midweek, not a Friday or Saturday night, I noped right out of the situation and sped off. Fudge. This was a couple of years before that weird clown sighting trend online too. Never saw that clown before or again, and nobody at work believed me. I know what I saw and I think about it every time I drive by that spot. Next story. Not me. But long time ago, I had summer gig on cemetery. We took care of flowers and whatnot. And my coworker came one morning with straight face and said, "I saw a real fudge gnome crossing the street, and the gnome even had a pointy hat." Nobody believed him, even though he insisted seeing one. Answer reminds me of a comment on here a while back by a guy who said, when he was younger, he and his family went somewhere that had a lot of gnome statues. And when they were driving away, he looked out the back window and all the gnome statues turned and maliciously smiled at him. He tried to tell his parents, but they didn't believe him. I don't know, could be a kid's imagination, but for some reason it really freaks me out. Next story. Not seen but heard. Just south of Erie, PA, my wife and I were visiting my parents over New Year's. My parents have a really nice cabin that we were staying in. My parents, being old, decided to go to bed early, so my wife and I went up to the cabin. We went inside. I laid down on the bed and started looking at my phone. Wife went to the bathroom. About 2 minutes after we got in the cabin, there was a loud, epically apocalyptic, loud rumble that started, and things on the wall started rattling. Then it got really bright outside and something flew over the cabin. There was a bright shine that came through the windows and moved across the room. It sounded huge and fudge epic. It was heading from the north to the south. No shoot. I still swear it sounded like a meteor the size of a state. The entire building shook. My wife jumped off the toilet and we ran outside and there was nothing. I went back down to my parents' house to ask if they heard that. They were both asleep with the TV blasting, so they didn't. My dad said it was probably the crazy neighbor blowing chute up. I've been around artillery fire, and artillery comes nowhere near how loud and massive this was. I have no idea how this wasn't in the national news, or at least local, but a week later there was an article from a Pittsburgh news source claiming people heard a very large object pass over 2 days after New Year's. There was no sonic boom, which seems odd, just a crazy loud rumble. Sorry there are no possums in my story. Next story. I've got longer versions in my comment history, but I live in the woods, and one night my dog was barking at the back door to be let in, but I ignored him because I was playing a game, and when I finally got annoyed by the barking, I tossed my controller into a pile of blankets next to me, only for it to hit, not hard, the aforementioned dog, who was sound asleep in the blankets. I have never been that scared in my life. Looking at my dog sleeping and hearing him barking at the back door at the same time is an unreal experience. I have a fenced-in yard and no neighbors. There was no other dog. Edit to add link to longer older comment. Answer: did your dog bark at the back door at night a lot? If this was a regular occurrence at that time of night, maybe your brain just imagined it because it was expecting to hear your dog barking around that time. I used to work in a shop that ran a ton of air tools. Pretty much all of the air fittings were leaking, so I would constantly hear a high-pitched hissing sound all day while at work. After I would get home, I continued to hear the hissing sound for a little while. I guess my brain was just imagining the sound because it was expecting to constantly hear it. Next story. I was sitting in my car at the lights while pedestrians were crossing in front of me. 2 teens walking. The one behind tilts his head up to the sky, and I shoot you not, a bird dropping went straight into his mouth. He immediately started coughing and retching. It took a couple seconds for the friend in front to notice and turn around. Choking, coughing kid was trying to explain what happened while they finished walking across the street. I was dying in the car. Had a front row seats to that, and I'm confident I'll never see that happen again. Next story. My husband and I were going through a very rough time financially. He said one day while at the store, a lady randomly walked up to him and asked him if he believed in guardian angels. He said yes. She then proceeded to tell him, our tough time will be over soon. Just have a little more patience. A few months later, we got an opportunity to work together with no rent, no utilities, etc. It's been a few years now, and I always look back at that time and remember how hopeless I felt. I was so glad we had that reassurance. People tend to not believe me when I tell them that story. Next story. I haven't really told anybody, as I'm pretty sure no one would believe it, but I saw my deceased aunt standing right in front of my bed the night of 27th of October, 2018. She was just 8 years older than me, and we grew up together more or less as siblings. I was the one who found her dead in her bed at 30 of an epileptic seizure several years prior. I woke up seeing her stand right in front of the bed, much taller than she was in real life, clad in white, I think. It was difficult to see what was her and what was her clothes as she was so bright, and radiating an absolutely insane white light, stronger than looking directly into the sun, yet still not hurting my eyes. However, the light didn't touch the walls. The room was still as dark as ever. I stood up in bed and walked on the bed towards her, looking her right in the face. She appeared to be speaking, but I couldn't hear her. I don't think she could see me, and she was just staring right in front of her. I just stood there in disbelief for a while, just looking at her, until eventually she dematerialized, and I immediately walked straight out of the bedroom and just walked around the house until daylight, not understanding what had happened. Seeing something like that, when not thinking something like that could happen, is more of a mind fudge up than you'd think, actually. Answer. Before my dad passed, I would have been on the fence about believing you, but now, oh yes, I believe you. Everything I experienced was a mind fudge in itself, but lovely in a way too. Long, so skip me if you want, my feelings won't be hurt. The first one is really hard to describe, so bear with me. Dad was in hospice and getting close. I was sitting by his head and hanging with everyone in the room when my brain told me that, hey, somebody new is in here. Looked up and at first didn't see anybody. At the foot of the bed, we had put all of his favorite pictures, including one of my grandfather who died before I was born. My eyes kept getting pulled to a spot right next to my uncle, but at Grandpa's height, where nothing was there but my vision kept distorting, and my brain recognized it as the picture of my grandfather. Like my brain was telling me, oh hey, I recognize you, I've seen pictures. The same way that can happen at a party, but I also knew there was nothing in front of me. But my brain kept telling me there was. Later, when it was just me and my siblings going in and out, I sat next to Dad and suddenly smelled my grandmother. Then my vision changed and all I could see was the wrinkly side of Nanny's face like I would see when she would hug me. I could feel her skin against mine, smell that talcum powder, whole nine for just a few moments. I got up, stretched my legs, walked around, saw other residents there, nothing. Went back to the chair, alone now. And that feeling of Nanny being there was just as strong, plus that grandfather shape my brain recognized was back and much closer, just wild. After Dad passed, silly, funny things would happen. Dad loved to keep things happy and fun. The toilet in his room had too much pressure, so it would let out this wee sound when it was done flushing. We all get quiet after having a good long cry, and my aunt flushing tissues. Wee! Later at the funeral, brought my husband who had never been in a church before, let alone a hardcore Catholic church. After we were grown, Dad loved to mess with us in church and get us to laugh. Right in the middle of the service when I was thinking, boy, if Dad was here, he would be messing with me so hard right now. Suddenly, my husband let out a teeny tiny "what the fudge" under his breath from seeing the priest shuffle on his knees incognito over to the pulpit and pop his head up since he forgot his lines. Thankfully, only heard him get to the cemetery and I was okay-ish until they started lowering the coffin down. Then I lost it. Suddenly, the wind picked up out of nowhere and my siblings, and only my siblings, got smacked each with a cluster of maple leaves ripped off the tree. But troublemaker here to whacked in the head with an acorn under a maple tree, right at a time when Dad would have knocked all four of us upside the head and told us to quit crying since everything was going to be okay. Friggin' acorn, though. Last part, then nothing in the 3 years since. A month later, I was admitted to the hospital after my SI joint gave way. Couldn't walk, hurt, and feeling so down, I missed my dad and I felt terrible. Like, what if he's hanging around and instead of sending peace his way, this is what he has to look at? Dad was a collector of quirky, happy, larger-than-life people. He disliked when people were sad. Then I fell asleep. Had a vivid dream where I was in this dim room with this black thing in the corner. It had the shape of my dad, and it was saying all the things that I was thinking were true. Each word was devastating. I started sobbing in the dream and saying I was sorry. He's gone now. Let him grown and flown. He's supposed to be free and done with me and only have the love I gave him. Then suddenly a pole lamp got turned on and I hear, "No, I am still your father." I turned and there was Dad, not the 73-year-old I parted with, but the young, huge, strong daddy that had always been my hero. He came and wrapped me up in that huge hug that always melted my troubles away and told me to go rest now. He is okay and I will be too. Then he turned and faced that thing in the corner that had turned into one of those people with a plague mask. They started fading away as Dad stood his ground, and the thing kept moving away. No more dreams, just restful sleep the rest of the night. The next day, hard to appreciate if you didn't know about Dad befriending and adoring and all sorts of happy, quirky people. My hospital door opens, and in comes this older gentleman who comes in booming in a thick German accent. "Hello, I am Joseph und I know how to say yo Nami. I have a very German last name. I am from Germany, from the place where they make the chocolate so we didn't get bombed in the war." He had me laughing in 5 seconds flat and in such better spirits, almost as much as if Dad had been there himself. Haven't experienced a thing since, and it's been 3 years now. But all of that in such a short space of time changed my entire viewpoint. You aren't alone, and you are very much believed. Sorry for the novel. If anything, it just did my heart some good to finally type it all out. Next story. Driving through Oklahoma at night, a fluorescent green light came speeding out of the trees, hovered near the RV for a split second, and then continued over the RV opposite the direction it came. I couldn't see a shape, just light. It was dark. I was driving an unfamiliar road, and there was traffic, so I couldn't slow down to investigate. This was way before drones were household items. Next story. In the early 60s, I saw an ivory-billed woodpecker in my yard when I was a kid. This was in southeastern NC, which is pretty swampy. I ran inside to look it up in a bird book. The book said it was thought to be extinct. Nobody really believes me when I tell them. I know, nothing like getting picked up by John Wayne Gacy. Next story. Me and a friend saw a towel literally teleport 1-2 inches away at the same time as if it was a localization glitch. The towel did not change shape at all during the movement. It was a perfect translation. We were in a room of 5 people, but only me and him were looking at the towel. We both confirmed we saw the exact same thing once we locked eyes after it happened. Mind you, we know this needs some type of explanation. I am a mathematical physicist, and he's a material scientist. We are not superstitious people at all, but we can't explain what we saw. Next story. In college, my roommates and I were convinced the apartment we lived in on campus was haunted. I attended a Jesuit university, and one of my roommates got holy water from a priest on campus to cleanse the apartment. We started on one end of the apartment and followed the walls towards the other end. We had one area left, and as my roommate was about to put holy water on the wall, a huge bright orb kept moving back and forth in front of us. It was the size of a basketball. We were terrified, but my roommate threw holy water on the wall, and it disappeared. I'm not even Catholic, and that legit scared me. All three of us experienced that together. Next story. My son and I were on the interstate and it started to rain a bit. We watched two white church vans in front of us start sliding, then flip, and landed right side up at the same time. All 5 lanes of traffic stopped initially to make sure everyone was okay. So many people stopped to help that as soon as we noticed people getting out of the vans and walk around, we got back on the road and continued on. It happened over a decade ago and we still talk about it. Our family does believe is because we don't make things up, especially like that. Next story. To begin with, I'm an atheist and a skeptic. I don't believe in the afterlife or ghosts. I believe there was a non-supernatural explanation for what happened, but I'm at a loss. So I was on vacation with my boyfriend in Buenos Aires. We stayed at a relatively nondescript, modern-looking boutique hotel. One night I woke up because the room had gotten terribly cold. I look up, and standing at the foot of my bed and looking right at me was a soldier dressed in a uniform, like you'd see in pictures from the 1700s or 1800s, with a colored sash and a fairly ornate hat. I'm still waking up, but also frozen in fear. And so I'm telling myself I'm still dreaming, that I've woken up before from a bad dream quite a few times, and I'll do what I always do, reach over, wake up my boyfriend, who will groggily reaffirm that everything's okay, and will fall back asleep. So I reach over and start shaking him, saying his name with increasing urgency. He starts to wake up, but before I can get a single word, he glances at the foot of the bed, right where I see the soldier standing. He jolts straight up in bed, eyes wide, and unleashes at a guttural scream that I will remember until the day I die. We grab each other, and then the man kind of disappears in a whoosh, is the best way I can describe it. Like he dissolves into the shadows. We're still sitting there, clinging on to each other. I say, "What the fudge did you see?" And he says a colonial solitaire and describes the hat and the sash and everything else exactly as I saw. We end up talking to a staff person about the history of the hotel. Turns out the hotel was once a hospital for wounded officers during one of the wars in the 1800s. Thinking about that scream and look on his face still gives me chill bumps. Answer: I live in NJ and grew up in a town where a Revolutionary War battle was fought. In fact, I live next door to a cemetery where many of the soldiers are buried. My grandparents lived down the street in an apartment complex that had a large empty field behind it. My grandmother said she woke up in the middle of the night and saw a soldier dressed in Revolutionary War uniform at the foot of the bed. She said he just faded away in seconds. She also saw a woman dressed in colonial-style dress in the spare bedroom once. I believe you. Next story. When I was a young girl, I went to a week-long sleepaway camp. One of the nights, they had a Native American person come out and teach us some history and tell us stories. This was at the main all-camp area. And then around the campfire, we did these chants dancing to call Bring Forth Deer. We sang for what felt like forever. It was fun and energetic. Then on the way back to our tent areas, there was a bit of a walk. It was a clear night, so we turned off our flashlights and our group continued the chants as we walked. As we got to a darker passage on the trail, an entire herd of deer, 15 to 20, ran out in front of us. Now it wasn't uncommon to see 1 or 2, but a pack of girls singing loudly should have scared all away, like we shouldn't have seen them at all. For them to dart in front of us as we were chanting the deer calling chant, we all stood stunned and in awe. I truly hadn't thought the chanting was anything more than a bit of a fun, and my atheist mind says that's all it was, but that was something. Answer: I follow this guy on Instagram who plays the guitar and sings to animals. They love it. Horses, lions, tigers, meerkats, anteaters, cows, elephants, all sorts of critters approach him and settle in for a listen. If there is no fence between the animals and the man, they will often nuzzle, sniff, or nip his guitar, microphone, or body. So maybe you really did call in the deer. Next story. I witnessed a mid-air plane crash. This was in Anchorage, Alaska, back in the 1980s. We lived near a small airfield called Merrill Field. At the time, I was kind of a UFO nut, and although I had not seen close encounters of the third kind, UFOs were a hot topic, and I was super excited to see a UFO of my own. I recall that everyone in my family were fed up with my obsession. Also, I was little fudge liar and made shoot up all the time. It was a bad habit. One night, I stepped out into my backyard just to check the skies. But if I'm honest, it was because my parents were fighting again. Sky watching is not ideal when you live inside city limits. The glare of street lights was oppressive, but I could see the lights of some planes flying around. They were small prop planes, probably Cessna or similar. Then I saw 2 of the lights satellites suddenly converged and there was a big crunch up in the air. I saw flames emerge as the two planes plummeted to the ground with an echoing crash. I ran inside and told my parents, who were annoyed that I had interrupted their bickering, to lie to them about a plane crash. But I was insistent. I took them outside and they stood exasperated as I told them what I'd seen. Then we could hear all the sirens begin. My family looked surprised, but they still thought I was lying. Back then, you had to wait for the morning papers to learn any news. There was a huge story about two planes that had collided midair. Apparently, one pilot had had a heart attack and veered into the other plane. There were no survivors. Even with this news article, my family still never quite believed what I had seen. But one good thing did come of this. It cured me of my habitual lying. I was so upset that no one would believe me when I was telling the truth that I became relentlessly honest afterward. Next story. It happened to me. I was on my motorbike at a speed of 70 km/h. A wet road came and I slipped and my head landed in front of the tires of a 30 km/h going truck and he hit the brake. It was so close my hair touched the tires. I had some bruises in my hand and all, but that was all and nobody knows. Next story. In the mid-'80s, I pulled up to a red light on Oahu but wasn't sure if I was going in the right direction. There was a convertible beside me, so I rolled down my window and asked the man next to me if I was nearing the place I was looking for. He was so nice, confirmed I was almost there, but all I could stutter out was thank you because he was literally Charles Bronson, one of my favorite actors. Pretty sure he realized that I recognized him because of the amused look on his face. Can't help but wonder how many people he told about me. I must have looked like... Next story. I met Britney Spears in 2002 at a gas station on Jackson Street called The Gate in Alexandria, Louisiana, using the payphone. She was in a black convertible Spider Mustang with a guy driving and two other girls. There were two payphones next to each other, and I was on one when she walked up to use the other. I tried to keep my composure, but eventually blurted out, "You look like Britney Spears." And she replied, "I get that a lot," and then winked at me. No one has ever believed me. Next story. My near-passing experience. When I gave birth to my daughter, my placenta tore and I began to bleed. A lot. The doctors took me quickly to another room and I must have already begun to die at that point because I was outside and above my body, watching them pull out my placenta on the table. All I could think about was how sad it was that my daughters would have to grow up without a mom. But as soon as I had that thought, it was replaced by fear because I realized I had no mouth. I saw others like me. They were all around me, all of us red, moving quickly through a tunnel, but had no way to communicate with them because I had no mouth. But then there was just me, and I suddenly realized I was the last living cell in my body. That's when they brought me back. After multiple blood transfusions, I was pulled back through the strange reality and back to life. Next story. When I was 12 years old, I went to what is basically summer camp. First time without my parents or strict supervision at the beach. So I rushed into the water full of excitement. Of course, I forgot to leave my glasses ashore and lost them after a couple of minutes. I told the other handful of kids from my group what happened. They helped looking for my glasses for a minute before all of us realizing how pointless it was. I had a breakdown crying because I realized that I'm going to be basically blind for the foreseeable future. I have very bad eyes, so an optician can't quickly cough up a replacement. The other kids were discussing calling for help, but it was a slow day at the beach and we walked quite far off from the main area. Since there were only a handful of people in earshot anyway, we decided it's futile. So after I stopped crying, the other kids walked me back to our caretakers down the shore. Some random kid in the water yells in surprise, "A pair of glasses just swam into my hands." They were mine, completely intact, not even scratched, 20 minutes after I lost them. We told our caretakers, and they didn't believe us. Neither did my parents or my friends at home. This comment inspired me to tell my story. Thank you. You might be effing of this. Next story. Angels. I had spinal surgery when I was 15 and ended up with a nasty infection. Things got a bit chaotic early one morning, and I remember they were waiting for Mom to arrive before taking me to surgery again. I knew something serious was happening, but not all the details. And for the first time, I started to feel scared. A man and a lady came into my room wearing clean white clothes, a bit like scrubs, but white. The man took my hand and looked in my eyes and told me I was very sick, but I was going to be okay. I asked if he was a doctor. He replied he wasn't, but said, "We're here a lot." The lady put her hand on my forehead and said I was brave and that I could rest and they'd stay with me. And then they just stayed with me, not speaking, and I wasn't scared at all, and it didn't seem weird at the time. I don't know how long this took, at least 45 minutes because that's how far we lived from the hospital. But then the lady said, "Your mom's here, we'll leave you with her." Around 10 minutes later, Mom came in. I asked her if she'd spoken to the nice man and lady, because when they said she was here, I assumed they could see her at the nurse's station and went to speak with her, which is why she hadn't come in straight away. She hadn't seen or spoken to anyone and had come straight to my room as fast as she could from the car park. Even if they were an infection-induced hallucination, they provided me with a sense of calm and reassurance that I was going to be okay, that I needed at that time. Next story. Many years ago, broke up with long-standing GF. Together since we were 17. We were 21, but it was time to finish. Maybe had been for a year, but eventually, late one night walked her home and said the words. And there were tears and stress and grief and turmoil. Eventually turned to walk home myself and passed a streetlight. It went out. Didn't think much of it. Then passed the next one. It went out. And the next one and every one I passed the whole way home. Maybe 50 of them. One frightened young fella by the time I got home. True story. Next story. My dad and I were putting away groceries when a German cockroach crawled out of a bag and ran off the counter and went under the refrigerator. He quickly lifted the full-size, completely stocked refrigerator and told me to grab the roach, which was apparently too stunned to move. I did as I was told. He was 6'4", muscular, and had been a Midwestern dirt farm boy who picked up stone masonry as another trade. He was 44 at the time, so he was probably at the height of his strength. Some people disbelieve me, but they don't know how big and strong American farmers can be. And they also can't believe a farmer's daughter understood the assignment. Eliminate the cockroach, even if it means squishing it in your hand. I got a quick smile as a reward. He got my lifelong admiration. Next story. My girlfriend and I were sunbathing on a beach and both saw a very strange orange and black butterfly type thing hovering in front of us. We both sat mesmerized by it for at least 20 seconds before looking at each other with looks on our faces like, "You seen this shoot?" The strangest thing about it was we both couldn't work out at it. The thing was 2 feet or 200 feet away from us, and it shimmied into and out of view like it was 2D. I thought I was hallucinating, as did my GF. No, we weren't on substances or tipsy. Strangest shared experience I've had, and still wonder what the hell it was 10 years later. Next story. Okay, this is weird as hell, and the first time I'm telling anyone. My partner and I were sitting on the couch and we saw something poke up under her skin out of nowhere. It looked like a small bead. We both looked at each other like, WTH? She goes, "Did you see that?" I confirmed them touched it, and it was hard, like it was a metal bead. Then just as fast as it was there, it disappeared and we never saw it again. We both freaked out. "Did you see that? What the hell was that? Where did it go? WTH?" I haven't told anyone because honestly, if one of us had not seen it, I don't think either of us would have believed it. Next story. I got you one better. We were living in LA. We had a hummingbird feeder with a couple of regulars. One day I see a hummingbird with half a head. Blum. He's flying, he's drinking. He's beating up the other birds like a normal hummingbird. He just has half a head. The skin is black, and I could see the emerald green tiny feathers overlapping the edge of the scar. The void is from center-line top of his head to right above where his ear would be. Just gone. Like someone had taken a cartoon bite out of him. I told my partner he was the poster child for doubt. Half a head? Nah, it must have been a shadow or something. I saw him multiple days and still doubt. Until one day I hear the strangled yawp of a yell, like he's been stabbed. And then I hear, "He's got half a head." Next story. I once towel whipped a fly right out of the air during a closing server shift. It was just me and the closing cooks. I dropped the towel and was Gen Z landing the bottled water flip trick excited, doing laps with my hands in the air. Not a single one of them believed me. Next story. Went walking with a friend and met a dog with its owner. The dog looked at me and rolled over to get a tummy rub. After that, we went opposite directions and kept looking back at each other. It's like the dog and I knew each other in a past life. It was weird. We recognized each other. I can't explain it very well. Even my friend felt the vibe and commented on it, LOL. Next story. A full 360 rainbow at Victoria Falls on the Zambezi River when the sheer volume and force of the falling water caused a thick mist to rise back up from the river, creating an upside-down rainbow that joined almost perfectly with the rainbow that was created by the falling water to create a perfect rainbow circle. Next story. I was in a boarding school and we had to walk to the dining hall, which was about a km walk. On the walk back to my house, hostel, after dinner, I would see a large red star that had appeared just over my house building. It would grow in size every day. And then one evening, as I was walking back, it pulsated and just vanished. I believe I witnessed the end of a red giant. Next story. I saw my cat in 2 places at the same time. I was in my bedroom with my boyfriend, and we decided to go to the kitchen for a snack. I finished petting my cat that was lying on the bed, and we left the room. From my room to the kitchen is a straight shot, and as soon as we left the room, I saw my cat, startled, look at me and jump down off the counter where he knew he wasn't allowed to be. We only had one cat, and there was no way he'd gotten from the bedroom and onto the kitchen counter in the couple seconds it took me to walk out the bedroom door and look into the kitchen. Nobody believes me. Next story. So I'm a full-blown 100 atheist. I don't believe in the supernatural or that heaven or hell exist on, but I'm 99.99 sure when I was a kid, about 6, I saw a ghost. I can still see it in my mind 30-ish years later. It didn't move. It didn't talk. It just stood there looking at me and 2 other kids. We immediately crawled back out of that space under that school stage. I cannot confirm if there was a body or not. I just remember seeing it and fleeing. Now maybe, hopefully it was just some paint in a plastic bag, and my childish mind made it real, hopefully. Answer, totally believe you. Has a very similar experience where my mom asked me to go upstairs to her bedroom and get a cardigan from her wardrobe. The bed was alongside the wardrobe, and I opened it, pulled it out, and when I turned to head back down, my eyes caught the pillow and top part of the duvet. A face, ash gray with closed eyes and a slight smile just there. I spent about 3 seconds looking before I bolted down. I was about 12 but know exactly what I saw. After that, I was always scared going up into their bedroom. Needless to say, a lot of dark and bad things happened to our family when we lived there. Next story. My childhood cat died, and I was very sad. She used to cuddle me every night to sleep before going to my parents' room. After she died, there was an evening where she came back and cuddled me to sleep. I'm not sure if it was a dream or not, but it is a core memory of mine and gave me closure for her passing. Next story. My 97-year-old dad says that when he was around 10 years old, he and a friend were on their way home because it was dark and they decided to take a shortcut across a cemetery. And while doing so, an old man dressed in old-fashioned clothing popped up from behind a headstone and told them to get out of there. He says they ran all the way home. Next story. My border collie jumped in the pool to hurt a frog. He swam around the frog several times, but the frog wasn't getting the message. This working dog wanted that frog out of this pool ASAP. The dog opened his mouth and scooped the frog up. In closed, mouth swam to the stairs, climbed to the pool deck, and spit the still alive frog out of his mouth. Frog hops away none the worse. Next story. On a tour of the Sorrel Plant Substance House in Savannah, GA, I was standing on the second floor of the carriage house looking down over the railing as the rest of the group walked up the stairs. The last lady in the group walked through them instead of up them. Coolest fudge experience I've ever had, and no one believes me. Next story. Our house backs up to an equestrian center. That is part of why we bought it, so we can sit on our deck, drinking coffee and watching the horses. We have 2 cats that like to roam free. Former farm cats, we have tried to keep them in, they get out. They are microchipped and collared and well known in our neighborhood. Please don't attack me for my free-range cats. One day I got the kids to school, grabbed coffee and a book, and went to the deck for a few minutes of solitude. I look over the fence and our girl cat, Shadow, was sitting on the back of a horse, just chilling on the horse's butt like it was supposed to be there. My family doesn't believe me, thinks I made it up. I swear that cat was riding a horse, but I've never seen it happen again. Next story. I saw a silver oblong-shaped object far up in the sky. No contrails, wasn't moving, or no nearby wires that could be holding it up. It was at a high altitude. I was with other firefighters we met to exchange equipment. I didn't say anything because it would have been difficult to see. I couldn't believe my own eyes, but I know what I saw. Still baffled. Didn't tell anyone because I didn't want them to think I was crazy and give them something to bust my chops. Answer. I don't doubt what you saw, but I'd like to offer an explanation. Airliners at dusk times of the day will reflect sunlight of the sides of the fuselage, but not the wings as they are on a different angle. At 35,000 feet, you can't hear them, and they appear to move slowly. You can see satellites go over in the early evenings for the same reason. They don't emit light on their own, but reflect the sun that is still shining on them. Sorry if I'm being patronizing. Next story. That next to James Cameron's family plot in his family's cemetery are the graves of Jack Dawson, Rose, and a family with the surname Titanic. They are all located in Caledon, near the Hockley Valley, Cal Hockley. I'm sure he stole all the names from Titanic from there, as well as probably getting the idea for the movie from there as well, since the family buried next to the Titanics are the Romanics. So at the cemetery, if you read the gravestones, it goes, Roman Tick, Titanic John, Jack Dawson. Next story. I had both winning pieces of the McDonald's Monopoly game when I was 13 years old. We lived in Cincinnati with my mom and grandma, and my dad would pick us up to go visit with him every other weekend at his place in Columbus, Ohio. So I had a map with some pieces on it at my dad's. He took us out to McDonald's a lot more. LOL, I remember getting Boardwalk in Columbus, which was part of the set that was the $1 million reward at that time. I made some kind of silly punny joke at the time. Anywho, we leave, come back to my mom's, and my grandma ends up taking us to McDonald's. This was such an out-of-ordinary thing. My grandma was a cook, so very, very rare for her to get fast food. Anywho, I get my game pieces, and I see that I have Park Place. OMG, I started sweating, y'all. I was freaking out, so excited. I start running around looking for my game board map from my dad's. Begin to realize I left it at my dad's. I rush and call my stepmom, out of breath, to please go grab my Monopoly game map. Told her where I think I left it. Well, it didn't matter. She already knew where it was, in the trash. She had been cleaning and threw it away. Well, she says she didn't know we were keeping them because of how emphatic I sounded that I had the winning pieces. She even checked the trash, but was pretty sure it already went out to the curb. And she was not getting in that trash. The absolute biggest gut punch I'd experienced at that young age. I was pretty upset and in wild disbelief over it for a while. I was this fucking close. Goddamn. It was a couple years before I could even muster up talking about it. I was recently giving my stepmom hell again for it, but I could tell she doesn't really believe me. Most people kind of just nod like, sure you did. I swear, y'all, I really did. I had Boardwalk in Columbus, and I got Park Place in Cincinnati. If only I'd managed to save the darn map to have them at the same time. Next story. God darn MF raccoon, standing on its hind legs. So I thought it wanted to meet, and I took a couple steps toward it and was like, OMG, I'm having a raccoon encounter. Nope, Meph charged at me, ran at me on 2 legs. So now that I've jumped to the scary part, let me pause and set the scene. I was in Alexandria, VA. I say that to clarify that I was not in hill country or in the backwoods somewhere. City life, city living had just arrived at my brother's friend's apartment building, and they, luckily, lived on the ground floor. And there was a raccoon on the stoop, hanging out, standing tall as hell. I'm a short person, and it looked like it was at least half my height, which is a lot for a wild animal. Okay, back to fear screams. So I'm screaming and backing away, not taking my eyes off of it, and then the raccoon gets down on 4 legs and is straight up darting at me. I'm already off the sidewalk, and my head was turned in the direction I was moving. I turned back to see my brother and his friend at the front door of the building. No raccoon in sight. Dafuk? I tell them my story. These bastards laughed at me and accused me of being scared of the dark, like wouldn't stop teasing me the rest of the night, refused to believe anything I told them. Few weeks later, his friend finally told us a rabid raccoon had been living in the sewer drain directly in front of the building and had jumped out to attack several people before animal control was able to get it. Next story. 15 years ago, I was up with my daughter in the middle of the night. She was around 10 months old, just started walking, but wasn't talking yet. We were sitting on the floor playing. She suddenly stood up and walked into the adjacent room. She stopped suddenly, started smiling, extended her arm, pointed towards the hallway, and she turned and looked at me. I couldn't see because there was a wall blocking my view, so I just assumed it was my wife. She continued to smile and was animated. I called my wife's name, but she didn't answer. So I stood up, walked into the room, and no one there. She stopped smiling and walked back into the room where we were playing. I'm not a religious person, but I instantly thought of my mom, who passed away several years before my daughter was born and never got a chance to see any of her grandchildren. It was wild, and it gives me chills whenever I tell the story. Next story. I live on the 2nd floor with windows facing the street. One day while I was coming home from work, about half a block away, I saw something small sticking out from one of the windows between the curtains. It wasn't anything ghostly, just something that barely moved, like it was looking out at the street, and as soon as it saw me, it immediately pulled back. When I got into the apartment, I checked absolutely everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I even moved the furniture that was fixed to the wall, but I didn't find anything. Next story. When I was a kid, I saw a UFO, not some standard normal-sized UFO, like 3 football fields big. It was dark out. I was on my way to baseball with a friend of mine, and I was looking at the tree line. I was staring at it for a minute before I realized what it was. This massive gray UFO with yellow sulfur-colored lights around the bottom. I got my friend's attention, and he saw it, and we both were freaking out. We told his mom, who was driving, and when we looked back over at the tree line, it was gone. She was saying, "You're just seeing things." But no one at school believed us. I've told that story for almost 20 years now, and not a single person believes me. Next story. My dad and I witnessed a fleet of about a dozen red orange orbs of amorphous light flying, hovering up above a mountain in the middle of nowhere, Sonora Desert, northern Mexico, in September of 2001. I would categorize them as UFOs only because I still don't know what the hell they were all this time later. The closest thing I can compare them to are the video and eyewitness reports of the Phoenix Lights. We were driving southbound on a very long road trip. We had started in Los Angeles with our final destination being Guadalajara. We were helping a family friend who was also with us drive his car back from the U.S. as he was moving back home. I was 13 and my school at the time was on a year-round system, so I was technically on summer vacation. Anyway, we found ourselves driving down a desolate two-lane highway in a very dusty, sparsely populated region one night. It was very dark, so we couldn't see much of anything besides the road in front of us and a few mountains in the distance, roughly off to our 10-11 o'clock, with the occasional car driving the opposite way every few minutes or so. The road was fairly straight, but veered off ever so slightly to the right and eventually past the mountains. It was very dark and these things gave off their own light, so it was hard to pay attention to anything else. We must have watched these darn things for what felt like 20-30 men all together. The way they moved was just weird. They had like this choreographed show of sorts that roughly followed this format. First, they would all emerge holding some precise formation like a triangle or a perfect 45-degree angle above the mountain, and they would hold it for a while and occasionally move into a different formation, but very robotic and precise. Then after a few minutes, they would all break the formation. Think like when football players break a huddle, and they'd all scatter in different directions and seem to disappear or dip behind the mountain. Then they'd all re-emerge together, but this time they'd all bob and hover along, almost playfully, as if they were dancing. Then after a few minutes of this playful display, without warning, one by one, they'd turn off, blip, 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 until none were left. After a few minutes, you'd assume that was it, but then they'd re-emerge holding a new different formation and restart the whole show all over again from the beginning. Altogether, we must have watched like 2 or 3 full shows before the road we were on veered off to where we couldn't see them anymore. It was just eerie. These weren't crafts or any other stereotypical UFO vehicles, not discs, not triangles, not tic-tacs, just orbs of semi-transparent, amorphous light that seemed to move with their own free will. If I had seen just one, I would have chalked it up to ball lightning or some other undocumented natural phenomena. Even after all this time, my dad refuses to talk with me about what we saw. I've tried countless times since, but he always changes the subject or pretends not to remember. Even later that same night, I brought it up and he was just like, yeah, that was weird, huh? Whatever it was scared him pretty good. I just want to know what the heck they were. TLDR. Dad and I witnessed a fleet of strange orbs of light doing an eerie performance above a mountain in the middle of nowhere, Mexico in 2001. Next story. At 2 different points in time, years apart, I saw some dude walk through the same wall, like it was not there. Both times it was early morning, and I was just walking alone when I saw it. The first time I ran and looked over the wall, but could see him. The second time I even ran around it and checked the place, but the guy was nowhere to be seen. Next story. There was a tornado warning near our area when I was really little. I don't think I was even in school yet. I was wearing one of my older sister's big hand-me-down jackets that was huge on me. I was outside with my mom in the yard, and the wind just took me. I started hovering next to my mom and felt myself start floating away as the wind filled up my coat. My mom grabbed my ankles and pulled me down. I have a recording on one of my phones I have to find of her confirming it for me, since no one ever believes me. Next story. My sister hooked a sea turtle while dock fishing, Atlantic. We were kids. Took both of us to save the pole, and luckily a nearby fisher ran up and cut the line. None of our family believed us. Even the fisher that cut the line, he told his group, we hooked a sea turtle when walking back to them just seconds after, and they didn't believe him either. My sister, myself, and that guy are the only people who know a sea turtle went for the bait. I'm not sure why people are so adamant in believing a sea turtle wouldn't go for fishing bait, but they still argue it now. It was out of season, but both sides of that dock along the beach were, and still are, sea turtle egg sites. Like, how is it so unbelievable? Next story. The Wild Hunt, or something similar. I was about 34 and have the very crystal clear memory of standing terrified out in our yard on a big moon night, what I called a full or nearly full moon. It was cloudless and windless. As I was looking at the moon, I watched the silhouettes of riders on skeletal horses charge silently across the sky. I ran in and told my grandma, but she said it was just the clouds being moved by the wind. I knew she was lying because there were neither, and that scared me more as my grandma wasn't one to lie. We've talked a lot about the strange things on that hill and in that house, and she's confessed there were a lot of things she made up to ease the mind of a scared granddaughter that saw things she couldn't. Added a word. Next story. I live in southern Indiana. A friend and I were traveling on an interstate, and it was after harvest, so all of the fields were just stubble. I was looking out the window, and there was a tree line maybe 2 acres away. It was a very big, like zoo-sized black feline. Around here, they are referred to as panthers, and once in a while you will hear about people seeing them in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I kind of yelled and told my friend to look, but we were already past it. Next story. I used to carpool to work with my dad when we worked in the same office, and he always wanted to leave early, so we were on the road at like 4 a.m. Lots of odd stuff. Once we saw what looked like a mountain lion the size of a bear. Once we saw two people, one on the other shoulders on a unicycle, both wearing headlamps as bright as headlights, zooming down the street in the other direction we both saw, but nobody else believes. Next story. It was my second year of apprenticeship, and I was a little later than usual. So I was walking, not paying much attention to my surroundings. I saw out of the corner of my eye that there were a lot of people standing around, but since crowds had never interested me, I kept walking. Ahead of me was a wide street with a tram running along it, which I had to cross. I slowed down when I saw something lying under a dark tarpaulin. At that moment, a gust of wind lifted the tarpaulin, and I stared at the severed head of a woman. I froze, unable to tear my gaze away, until I felt hands on my shoulder. It was a police officer who gently led me away. He asked me how I was and if I wanted to lie down in the ambulance. I was so confused that all I could do was keep saying I had to hurry, I had to get to work, or I'd be in trouble. After a while, they let me go. My boss thought my story was an excuse and only believed me the next day when the incident was in the newspaper. The woman had tried to jump onto the moving tram and was run over by the wheels. Her head rolled away, but her body remained stuck under the tram car. For many years afterward, I had recurring dreams about that head. Next story. I saw a huge, fully decorated Viking ship in the middle of the empty field, twice. First time it happened, I was around 5. It was a field I saw thousands times before and after, hundreds time a day. A field I saw from our living room window. We went to get some groceries with my parents, and the boat was just chilling there. Huge boat. I have never seen anything like this before. I dismissed it as some kind of decoration and didn't think much about it. It was gone when we came back a couple of hours later. The second time I was around 11-12. We were on the road trip and I saw the same huge Viking ship in the field around 15 kilometers, around 10 miles from the previous place I saw it. It was gone few minutes later. We went the wrong way, so we had to turn. No idea what that was. It was visibly huge, fully decorated, just chilling, sitting on the field like if it was sitting on the water. I visited Viking museums around Norway in 2019, and some of the ships in the pictures and models looked eerily similar. I had never seen it in any field anymore. It's been over 20 years, and I still can't wrap my mind around it. Next story. I used to have a little freshwater fish tank, and I got a snail to help clean it. Once the snail got bigger, he would catch and eat the fish at night. At first, I thought maybe he just ate dead ones, but one time I saw how he did it. He would crawl up to the top of the tank, start stretching backwards over the surface of the water so his shell was upside down, then release off the side and slowly float down to the bottom. If the fish was asleep in the dark, he would definitely be able to catch them that way. The one fish he never ate was a male beta. That